Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us one of our favorite guests, our returning guest, James Lindsay. He is co-author of How to Have Impossible Conversations and Cynical Theories with Helen Pluckrose. And you're one of the main guys in terms of fighting what's going on with critical race theory and all this other kind of ideology that's coming out of the universities. 1 second, my screen froze. Okay. James, what I want to ask you about, and of course, being the co-author of How to Have Impossible Conversations makes you the perfect guest for this train wreck of a show. I was really kind of impressed as my house is still a complete disaster and everyone's getting ass mad. You were telling me about the story of the backdrop that you have, which I thought was pretty interesting. Can you share that with the guests?
Yeah, so I got a world map behind me. So the deal was that there's a few things. Speaking of people getting ass mad, I just had a wall. Like, I don't care what's behind me. And I don't know why other people care what's behind me. And people wanted like a TV screen with like fake cityscapes. And like people were trying to get me to green screen, but then you're like, part of your face disappears every time you turn your head. It's like, what? So I've wanted a map upon which I could document all of the absurd number of flights that I take, just as kind of like a little conversation starter or curio, and just, I don't know, I don't get nostalgic or whatever, but I thought it'd be cool. And I've been thinking about it for a while. And finally, I just was like, you know what? The solution to this problem is to buy the largest world map I can find and stick it on the wall behind me, and then get a marker and draw my flights on it, which is what I've done. So it's kind of probably hard to see, and there's a little bit of glare from the lamp, but because it turns out I didn't intend to get a shiny one, but it saved my ass because a couple of my lines were wrong and I could erase them.
Well, this is something I want to ask you. People used to get upset at me because I had my headphones tangled when I'd have them on. This is an old pair of headphones, and they thought I was trying to troll them intentionally, when it wasn't that at all. It was that I didn't understand the utility of spending the time to untangle the headphones when they get tangled again, but I'm only using them for this. So that was something I didn't understand. But I do want to ask you, and I apologize in advance if I'm spoiling a troll, that map is crooked. It does it not?
I know. No, actually, you're not. It's not a troll. It's even worse than that. The thing that my computer is sitting on is crooked, and I can't be asked to fix it. I actually went with a level. The map is level, so the rest of the universe is crooked as a result of me not leveling. No shit. My computer is sitting. Here's the glamour of being a world-class culture warrior. My laptop is sitting on a fucking shoebox, and it's not perfectly level. And it's honestly, it probably is. And the floor underneath the desk is probably actually what's not level. But the map, however, at least across its top line, I actually leveled. The problem with the map, and you can't see it because I was very careful about how I arranged it, is actually that it's about 6 inches too high. So there's this stupid gap of white wall under it, and you can't see part of it when I line it up for most of my interviews. And I can't be fucking bothered to fix it because we put this plaster on the wall and it's so fucking hard to drive a pin through it that it's like I bent almost all the pin. I was like, I don't have to get nails to put up a map. And this is, and then here, even better. This is how I drew the lines. You know what this is? This is a piece of leftover quarter round that's supposed to go up like in the corner that never got put up there.
I just love the idea that this is somehow your homage to geocentrism. No, it's the map that's correct. Everything else is wrong.
Well, it turns out that the room really is what's wrong. And so is the laptop. And so is this shoebox. I've used it so long, it's smashed. And it is. Yeah.
And you have no capacity to acquire a new shoebox.
No, I have
the supply chain.
No. So this is exactly the same story as your headphones.
Okay.
I have the capacity. I do not have the motivation.
Okay.
Because I don't see the point. I don't give nearly as much of a shit about my appearance on a video as one might believe.
Okay, so let's segue to something about current events. Who would you say is a bigger shitlord, you or the president?
Well, I mean, the president just swooped in and took it out from behind, didn't he?
What has been your reaction to hearing about the possible rumors? People don't. I was surprised at this. There was a Republican operative, I forget the woman's name, and she had tweeted out that rumors are going around the Vatican that President Biden had an accident in his pants and had to change clothes when he was meeting the Pope.
Poopgate.
Yeah, Poopgate. Poopgate was trending. Poopy Pants Biden was trending. I've been having a field day with this. My Twitter, which is normally diarrhea, has become literally diarrhea. Would you be surprised to learn that this was true?
Absolutely not. I've actually, and they're all unconfirmed rumors, so I don't say anything about them. I've been hearing that this is a second, like a halftime occupation of half of the White House staff as it is to follow around and play cleanup. So I've been hearing this for months. So the last thing that this is surprising to me. I don't know if any of that's true, but it's like the dude's old. He's clearly not all there. I think last time I was with you, we even talked about you can't make fun of somebody with dementia, and you were like, "Hold my beer," and I will.
Hold my stool.
Yeah, hold your stool, of course. And well, don't hold it because it's got loose. Biden's ass is running. Will somebody go catch it? All the old jokes come back. But no, anyway, I don't remember where I was going with that, but no, I'm not at all surprised by this. This is exactly consistent with what I've been hearing. I was saying he's a dementia, plus he's on an absurd amount of Adderall, which apparently I just saw some article today. Somebody sent me, was like, did you know Adderall makes you poop? And I'm thinking of that picture of him where he looked like Beavis, like doing the cornholio thing at the other day. And I'm like, oh, he's on stims. And, I'm not surprised at all. No, I think it's totally likely.
I'm going to play devil's advocate. I mean, that job has become so insanely difficult, and there's so much.
Which job?
The presidency. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
there's so much under your umbrella. You have to cover, he's dealing with the split Senate, a tie in the House. So he doesn't really have a governing coalition. I believe he was the first president to be elected without really control of the Senate, like in decades. And he's an old man. This is going to do a number on anybody. So I'm not surprised they got him full of Adderall or whatever else it takes. That's not crazy. Yeah.
Sure. I don't think the man's well, and I don't think it's controversial to point out that the man's not well. And the idea that he, had a little holy shit come out at the Vatican doesn't surprise me. I've given up. I think that I spent much of the past year watching Biden and being torn between feeling enormous compassion for the fact that this looks like elder abuse to have stuck a person at his age and in his condition in this position, as you just described the quality of the job too, or the demands of the job. And then secondly, no, the motherfucker deserves it. So it's like I've been torn between those two emotions watching him. You want to make a deal with the devil, he's going to collect his due. And so, what's happening is, to my eyes, elder abuse. But how abusive is it when you get to be the most powerful man on earth? I do know though that the funniest meme I've ever seen is, there's that picture, it's all out for this. I laughed to the brink of becoming ill. Somebody sent me this meme, and it's Biden where he's got that look where he's staring off into the distance that everybody knows the look. And it says, "Who shit my pants?" is the funniest thing I think I've read in print. But as you will know and appreciate, better than most people I get to talk to, we live in Baudrillard's hyper reality. So it actually doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he actually pooped or not.
It's so great. And you know what the best argument I've seen on Twitter is? Biden can't be shitting his pants because Trump was the one who was shitting his pants.
Oh no.
Obviously, if one person is incontinent, therefore the other, who is the opposite, is therefore continent. That's just basic logic.
Basic logic. It's antonym day in kindergarten. Oh my gosh, that's great. I didn't realize. No, I mean, I liked I think there was like a Reuters fact check that was like context missing or mostly false. It said mostly false, not all the way false, just mostly false.
He didn't shit his pants. He shit his diapers. This is a lie.
That's right.
It's a conspiracy theory.
It didn't leak all the way through.
One of the things I want to talk to you about, and I wouldn't bring this up if it wasn't something that happened publicly, you got into it pretty hard with Claire Lehman of Quillette from Australia on Twitter. You guys got back and forth, and it got pretty personal. Can you give us the background about what happened and your perspective on that? I haven't spoken, Claire. I don't know her at all.
I could give you all kinds of background. So first of all, I will point out that, as far as I was concerned, largely came out of the blue. It was certainly not a James Lindsay initiated civil war at Claire. What I was doing was actually picking on Kathy Young.
Her Igor.
Yeah. And so I was calling Kathy Young crypto woke,
Okay.
uh, which I think is an apt description for her. And so I was calling her that, and then Claire. And I don't think that this is a coincidence. It turns out I was at CPAC this year,
Mhm.
just visiting. I didn't speak. I wasn't invited. I just went, and because a bunch of other stuff was going on, and it's good to be in the room and meet people and so on. So I went to CPAC, and they had that Matt Brainerd brought that golden Trump surfer boy gimmick to his booth or whatever in the gimmick room, and I went to the golden Trump, as many people did, to take a picture because it's funny. So I took a picture sitting down at the feet of the golden Trump with his magic wand. And then I went over and borrowed my friend's Make America Great Again hat. I didn't have one. I don't have one still, actually. And I put it on my head, and I took a selfie, and I just put it on Twitter how it started underneath the gold and then how it's going. And I'm wearing a MAGA
That's a
hat.
meme. Yes.
And that's the day that Claire decided to call me retarded, out of nowhere. And
Wait,
then
is she wrong though? Can you clarify? Is she wrong?
I mean, so it turns out that, special ed applies on both ends of the spectrum.
That's true.
So no, she's definitely not wrong. I mean, I've got my own little like severe disabilities mentally and emotionally for sure. But yeah, so that's not the backstory really, though, as far as my view goes. I mean, she was upset that I was going after Kathy. Fair enough, whatever. If they're like in a coalition or they're compatriots, that's fine. And she took the shot on a day when I had put up something, Trumpably controversial, where lots of people would have received, the message that, yeah, well, he's gone over to the dark side or whatever, as opposed to, wait a minute, something's badly gone wrong over here on
Right.
Team Left. Team Blue is like out of the you can't say it's off the reservation anymore. You can't say that. I can say that, but you can't say that. You would say it, actually. So the backstory to me, though, was that I launched New Discourses about a year before, and the New Discourses, I put all my chips in, if you want to talk about it that way, on the idea that critical theory is at the heart, intellectually speaking, of what's going on in the world today. And I just went full bore into explaining critical theory, into explaining critical race theory as a derivative of critical theory, making the link, researching that link. And I remember, because there were a bunch of people that were trying to write things for Quillette all summer and all fall last year, who were getting their papers either rejected or having every bit of my work edited out. I was like, well, something's weird with Claire. And the phrasing that I'd heard back from people was that it was too obscure. Critical theory is too obscure. Nobody's interested in it. We're not going to lean into this. And so I was like, whatever, I'm just going to keep doing what I do. And then I saw this interview. I kid you not. And so it was in February when she went after me for the first time.
February of this year.
Of this year, yes.
Yeah, okay.
February of this year. And then it was in, I guess, probably January or later. It was somewhere in the month preceding that I saw, and I don't know when she recorded it, her sit down with John Anderson, who is a former prime minister, deputy prime minister, or something like this, a former deputy prime minister of Australia. He's brilliant, has a great podcast. And she sat down with him and was just kind of explaining the nuts and bolts of critical theory. And I was like, oh, she's moving into this market now. I was like, it's only a matter of time till she goes after me. I just thought it was going to be nothing personal, just business, it's,
Sure.
Gun to the side of my head. I want your market. I got you. And so when she came after me, like, I was in my hotel at CPAC after having laughed all day about that series of images, the golden Trump, Make America MAGA, baby. And it's a couple hours later, boom, there it is. Claire comes after me, and I remember laying there, like, I think I was a little drunk, like laughing my ass off that it finally happened. And then so after that, it's just like, well, we'll just, I guess, sporadically throw bombs at each other and let it be. And so that's what it's been ever since. I mean, she's pretty clearly just rock solid anti-Trump and all in, and I get it. Like, she wants to defend her country and its last three shreds of respect that it might deserve, but she's all in on the whole, like, saying that Australia has not gone tyrannical, which is ridiculous,
Right?
And I think that those are not a bridgeable gulf, because I don't think there's any this is the nature of the red pill, if you will, is if we even go back to the film The Matrix, is you can't see outside of your perspective until you've taken the pill and popped out. And if she's like all in on the narrative on COVID, which I don't know how that's possible anymore, she can't see it, and there's no conversation to be had.
If Trump tried to implement Australians, or if Trump successfully implemented Australian style restrictions in the United States, there would be on CNN calls for his death. There already have been calls for his death when former Governor Bill Weld said explicitly that Trump was guilty of treason. And in his words, this is William Weld's words, the punishment for treason includes the death penalty. He said this brazenly. I think it was CNN or MSNBC, one of those two.
Right.
And there was really not much of a backlash about, a sitting politician who was running for the vice presidency at the time, or had been running for the vice presidency, openly opining that the president should be given the death penalty. It was just shocking. So I agree with you. The nature of the blue pill is, okay, if someone you didn't like was doing this, would you be as much of a cheerleader or an advocate of what you're saying? Or would your reaction be the complete 180? And in this case, I think it's very clear the reaction would be the complete 180.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's very interesting with COVID, because I think about this a lot, because I have a number of people who I know are very smart people in the real sense, not in my sarcastic sense, who very well educated, who I think they're very blue pilled and on the COVID narrative. If CNN and the CDC just flipped over tomorrow and said, whoops, vaccines are dangerous, you shouldn't take them, they would say nobody ever should have taken it. Within hours, they'd always say, their position would have flipped completely. I get that perception here. It's just it's a deep and interesting question. Honestly, it's a deep question, because I'm perceiving in the world that there are lots of ways you can dichotomize the world, but in one way we can is that there are people who still trust that the institutions are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then there are people who do not.
Right.
And the people who think the institutions are still functioning, they're very interesting to watch on Twitter, because they tend to be very smart, often very insightful, but utterly baffled by everything that's happening.
Yeah.
They're just baffled. This is very strange. How could this very bizarre document have come out? This was very bizarre behavior by President Poopy Pants. It's real, it's very bizarre that Reuters would fact check an obvious joke about, the Mediterranean Sea in the middle of the United States and climate change. It's very strange. You can just see that they're baffled, and it's because they think we still live in a functioning liberal republic, and we don't.
Hey guys, we all want to make sure our family is protected in a medical emergency. And what many of us don't realize is that health insurance won't always cover the full amount of an emergency medical flight. Even with comprehensive coverage, you could get hit with high deductibles and copays. And that's why an Air Medcare Network membership is so important. As a member, if an emergency arises, you won't see a bill for air medical transport when flown by an AMCN provider. Best of all, a membership covers your entire household for as little as $85 a year. AMCN providers are called upon to transport more than 100,000 patients a year. This is coverage no family should be without. Now, as a listener of You're Welcome, you'll get up to a $50 e-gift card with a new membership. Simply visit airmedcarenetwork.com/malice and use offer code malice. That's airmedcarenetwork.com/malice. Hey guys, want to talk to you about Fume, which is one of my favorite sponsors. Fume is a great way to stop smoking and to stop vaping, because what Fume does is they take the benefits of the world's super plants, behavioral science, and beautiful design to help make quitting smoking easier. Why? Because you don't have to have that habit of what to do with your hands when you want a cigarette, when you want to vape. They have these little device. It looks like a steampunk vape. It's carved out of Canadian wood. And you have cores that you stick at the end, which are filled with the benefits of the world's super plants. They have ones to help you relax, ones to put you in a good mood. No smoke, no vape, no nicotine, no harmful chemicals, and you look really cool at a party. Oh, what are you holding there? Oh, this is just my Fume. If you go to breathefume.com, that's breathefum.com/malice, you get 10% off your order. And now they've got something called the Quit Naturally pack. You get the Fume itself and 4 packs of cores studied to curb cravings and get you on the path to being nicotine free. That's breathefume.com/malice for 10% off. and you'll be thanking me and saving a lot of money that you might be wasting on vape juice and cigarettes. Hey guys, we got a different kind of sponsor for this episode, which is the Jordan Harbinger Show. It's a podcast you all should be listening to. Every day, someone tells you you have to listen to some podcast, and people nod and say sure, and they don't listen to it. Don't let that happen here. Jordan's Show, which Apple named one of its best of 2018, is aimed at making you a better informed, more critical thinker, so you get a sense of how the world works and come to conclusions about what's happening even inside your own mind. Each episode is a conversation with a different guest. He's got some really big names. And when I say this something for everyone here, I mean it. In one episode, he's talking to a hostage negotiator from the FBI who offers techniques about how to get people to like and trust you, something I think most of us could certainly use. Then he's talking to a cinematographer who discovered a lost city in the jungle. Lots of great stuff out there. We really enjoyed this show here at Podcast One. We think you will as well. Search for the Jordan Harbinger Show. That's HARB as in boy, IN as in Nancy, GER on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or if you're wherever you listen to podcasts. That's Jordan Harbinger Show. And I think you'd like it a lot. You could go to jordanharbinger.com/subscribe. You could go to jordanharbinger.com/iTunes for the Apple stuff. And to learn more about him, you go to jordanharbinger.com/about. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, and I think a lot of it also has to do with the idea that the people who are in power often make mistakes and get things wrong. But it's also like in terms of how many people are murderers. Sure, murder is a problem. No one's going to deny murder is a problem. But statistically, the number of people who are murderers is infinitesimally small. There's 350 million people in America. I don't know how many murders there are, but it's going to be less than 100,000. So, but that's their idea. It's like, okay, sure, reporters get it wrong. We all get it wrong. We're human beings. But if they do get it wrong, eventually they're going to get fired. The newspaper will run a correction. The truth will out in the end. And they cannot even accept as a hypothesis that there are incentives to be untruthful, to put it mildly, and that people respond to those incentives. And that also owning your lies would actually be deleterious to many of these people. So they have to double down.
Right. Also owning your just error when in the case when they aren't lying. Which creates I believe our friend Jean-Francois Lyotard called that a legitimation by parology, where, there's this false consensus where I think about that with the COVID thing in terms of doctors. Imagine being a doctor and looking at the data that are coming out and realizing that you've been basically prescribing exactly the wrong thing dangerously for a year and a half. Or at least this year, if it's just a vaccine. You
know what I think it is? I think it's this kind of the same strategy as being in a school of fish, which is if I am doing this and literally every other doctor is doing this, then I can't be culpable because no one's going to pick me out and have accountability for me. Whereas if there are some doctors who are straying from this school and giving alternatives, now the concept of moral responsibility and choice is reintroduced into the equation. And now I'm in trouble because now I knew that there were choices to make. And if I did end up making that deleterious, harmful choice, I am a bad person. That's why this need for unanimity and submission is so important to them, because it absolves them of any guilt for making the wrong choice. Because what are we going to do? Everyone else is doing it.
Yeah, exactly. This is just what everybody was doing. That's what I, for a while, I don't know what I should do with it, but I was dead wrong about the COVID lockdown stuff for the first month and a half. And it was like, well, everybody was going along with it. We didn't know the models. And it's like, those are just lame ass excuses for not wanting to just say, yeah, I was actually wrong. I was really wrong about something that mattered. And I don't think that my voice being the other way would have made a whole lot of difference. But even if it did, I have to own the fact that I didn't participate I didn't see the thing that should have been seen. I'm glad of how I ended up actually red pilling myself on that narrative, which was that I just started gathering data and seeing what the data said myself. It's like, well, I sought to prove the narrative, and the data won that round of cards. And I'm proud of myself that I changed my mind, but it was still, almost 2 months in, which is pretty bad.
Another example of this, which you don't have to have any particular insight into COVID or anything, is social distancing. If social distancing was useful and efficacious in preventing the spread or lowering the risk of getting COVID, why wasn't it reintroduced when the Delta variant was, resurging and COVID cases were rising? And if it wasn't effective, why were we all mandated to do it to begin with? So they can't both be true. And once you point that out to people, if they're even remotely amenable to critical independent thought, things start adding up. But for a lot of people, they're perfectly happy. And I think people don't appreciate this. Blue pill people are perfectly happy to shrug their shoulders and be like, well, I don't know, but they must know what they're doing.
I've had that conversation. I actually literally had a conversation with a very intelligent professional man a couple of months ago. And he said, well, if we don't all get vaccinated, talk about a blue pill narrative line. We don't all get vaccinated. 95% of us will be dead within 5 years. That's what he told me.
95? Like, how is that even
95.
statistically possible?
That's what I said. That was literally the question I asked. I said, how is it statistically possible given the survival rate and that the median age of death is above life expectancy? There's nothing to suggest that that's even remotely true. And he just had, the answer: variants. It's like they have said that variants are just going to keep coming, and variants are the thing that are going to kill us, and they're obviously all going to keep getting worse. And it's like you could see that he had, got a mathematical background. He's done some massive extrapolation off of, alpha to delta or whatever it was, and come to this conclusion that 95% death within 5 years. And I've actually heard that statistic repeated from other people independently, as far as I can tell, as well. So I don't know if there's some common source that had said it on TV, or I don't know where it came from, but that's what I got. But they know what they're doing, right? The CDC knows what it's doing. Right. It's figuring it out. It's doing the best it can. Uncertain circumstances, blah, blah, blah. And then having an answer to every particular, it's almost like a talisman in verbal form that you use to ward off critical thought. How is this statistical impossibility going to happen? Magic word: variance. That's how. Yeah. And I run into this everywhere. And I wrote this book, How to Have Impossible Conversations. I literally don't know how you get past that. You keep asking questions, you show contradictions in the logic, but it's almost what I've run into is with this particular thing, because there's so much kind of both emotion and partisan identity baked into it, that if you cross the wires to get somebody to, try to jumpstart that critical independent thinking, and you get the little arc, then they go berserk. Like, I had a guy yell at me. We were talking about something to do with diversity hiring, and he was like, we're going to take the number of female applicants and double this to make up for the fact that they have a 2-to-1 ratio and something else, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, how do you know that all of that discrepancy, we'll assume that it's real, is due to discrimination, which people might agree to want to, step in and do something remedial against? And he said, what else could it be? And it was like a Gollum moment, right? Like he saw the ring and turned, like his teeth sharpened in his eyes. It was like, what else could it be? And it was like the idea that even suggesting, and this is a guy with a PhD. This is a very educated, mild-mannered, liberal dude, like left liberal American dude. And I was just like, whoa, it's like, I shouldn't name who it was, but I used to be in communication with somebody who's relatively famous and very smart. And he said he used to call it brainworms. He's like, you hit the brainworm and the brainworm takes over and they just yell at you. It's like a complete emotional overreaction. And that's crazy, but what it is it's an amygdala reaction.
But it could even in his own worldview, it could very easily be that women are taught not to go in certain careers because of patriarchy, and they're told that they're not good enough to be lawyers and doctors. So that's not even discrimination. In that case, it's that the women are brainwashed and the women are being oppressed in some loose sense of the term. So right. You don't even have to have some other explanation. Like, that is a very plausible explanation. I don't agree with it. Well, certainly a percentage of it, but that would explain something about being discriminatory.
Yeah, I'm telling you, what else could it be? Was the entire line of analysis from somebody whose job it is. And he's literally a data scientist.
And do you know what else you would want him? If I were him, I would hope there is a non-discriminatory answer. I would hope, it didn't work this way because zip codes or something, and the applications went to the wrong houses, and this is something easily fixed. That, things aren't as bad in terms of sexism as I had thought. That would be great. Like, I would want that but no, like, this is the emotional commitment to that being the reason for the world not looking like it is in his mind is very intense. And I'll point something else out to you and to the audience, is that I think it's something I've been thinking about the last couple of weeks, is I don't think people appreciate to what extent social policy is dictated by television. Meaning they watch like a law show or some kind of business show, and they see what the boardroom looks like, and it's going to be very diverse. And of course, the CEO is going to be Black, and then you're going to have this, and that, and it's a Benetton ad. And then this is quite literally their basis of reality. They've never stepped foot in a law firm, let alone, the boardroom of a law firm. They've never stepped foot in the boardroom of a company. So this is their only way of, quote unquote, seeing what it is. And then they're like, okay, I saw it on my TV, therefore it's possible. Therefore, we have to take the steps to make sure that this looks like that. And it's like, okay, what if there aren't enough Black female lawyers who are of a certain age to go around to be CEOs of these law firms or whatever, senior partner, figure it out. That's the problem. It's like, well, you can't just create like experienced lawyers who have a certain demographic overnight.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. The hangover effect of, say, previous discrimination or whatever that is, or just even
or even market need. There may not have been a need for lawyers that many 30 years ago. So those women who are high achievers would have been smart to become doctors or some other kind of professional.
Right. Exactly. So this is, I don't know, the critical theories, when I look at them, have a very powerful skill. I think Marx's theories in general do this, and it's to collapse things into the so-called univariate fallacy. Just to pick one kind of bugbear variable that becomes the explanation for all evil in the world. And what we have now with this kind of identity Marxism that's grown up out of, Marcuse's vision to create a new proletariat out of the disaffected and the minorities, et cetera, is that it pretends to be many dimensions of analysis at many variables at once. Oh, you got race, sex, and sexual identity. Those are different variables. No, they're really the same variable. They're really the same variable. Are you being oppressed by your identity? And this just absolute collapse of, broader analysis leads them to back themselves into these corners. And you're framed out as some kind of a horrifically bad person who's ignoring one of the biggest problems in the world. And then, so there's that aspect. Then as you bring up television, I've been completely convinced of this. I still think that I think that this is a general rule. So this isn't me advocating for anything, because if your policy program is that you're going to get everybody to do something by voluntarily, this is never going to happen. Right. Human beings are not going to play this game. And so, but I seriously think that if everybody just turned off the television for about 6 months, we would straighten out the world in about a year. I seriously think that what you're pointing at and other aspects of how the television manipulates our perception of the world and our emotions and so on it's grotesque. There is an answer, by the way, to the situation you raised, which is how they always also want to outsource the solution to somebody else. They want to point out the problem, right, and somebody else has to do the work to make it fixed. As it turns out, I actually know some guys that have been doing this in their companies now. If you give them that job, you know what they do? What? Like to a man, every story I've heard so far, what? Quit. If you say, wow, you're right, there might be 6 more awesome Black female attorneys out there, and we're missing out on awesome talent and great diversity. So it's your job now to go find them. You have you have 3 months, you go find them. If you succeed, you get a promotion and a new title in an office or whatever. And if you fail, well, I'm sorry, you're fired. You didn't do your job. It was your idea to bring this into the company. It's your responsibility now. To a man, and I know now at least half a dozen stories where this has been implemented on one of these people that's agitated in a company. They have all quit. And I shouldn't say to a man, because it's to a woman. They are literally all white women from the suburbs. And every single one of them have quit their job when told it is your responsibility, with the sword hanging over your employment. And of course, not just with a stick, but a carrot. Here's your promotion. Here's your new title. You're right. Maybe you're right. The talent's out there. Our company will be better off if you go get it. It's your job.
And you know what? That's very commendable. If you're talking about someone who's an child of an immigrant or immigrant themselves, someone who like overcame living in a very poor, which is going to be high crime ridden area, and they made something of themselves through their hard work, and that person is someone I would definitely want to hire, because they're going to see through bull a lot faster, and they're going to have an insane work ethic. and their intelligence, and they're going to appreciate what they have. People who came from nothing to achieve something really have a high work ethic and a high quality of just as a human being. So this is not even some kind of lefty thing. This is a commendable goal. Like find these talented people because they're going to kick ass, and they're also going to look great in front of a jury.
Yeah. Now the trick is you also have to add in that we're not going to change standards whatsoever.
Yeah.
Right. We're not going to hire a less qualified person. The company standards remain the same. Your job is to go find them. And so you kind of call their bluff. And one of the CEOs that I talked to that's done this, he literally said he realized it puts him in a win-win situation.
Yeah.
If they succeed, he gets awesome new talent. If the diversity score actually matters, he gets more diversity score. He ends up with, finding another important piece of talent in his workforce that he didn't even realize he had that can go find this. It's all winning. But on the other hand, if the person was BSing, he gets rid of them because you're going to quit or fire him.
That's brilliant. I've been aware of critical theory since I was in high school because I'm a huge devotee of the pundit Camille Paglia. She was ranting about Foucault even before I knew how to pronounce it. Are you familiar with her work, and what do you think of her as a force?
I am modestly familiar with her work. So yes, I know who she is. Yes, I've read some of her, more famous essays and more popular essays, and I've listened to her speak at a number of, interviews or speaking engagements she's had. So I'm familiar. I wouldn't call myself like a Paglia scholar. I haven't read through her books or anything in great detail. She is a force to be reckoned with because she understands the logic. She also understands where it goes wrong. And short of somebody who just won't lick a boot, that's the scariest thing in the world when you have one of these kind of ideological things happening, is somebody who can actually see both sides of the argument and point out why it's wrong and what's better. And so she's very dangerous. Like her lefty cred goes way back. And her anti-establishment cred is, impeccable. And so then to have her coming out and getting all over this postmodern and critical theory nonsense and saying, look, it's just not real. It's extremely threatening to them, and it's extremely powerful. She's also just very, very smart and very on point with a lot of what she has to say. So yeah, I'm not a stan, but I'm a fan.
You ever feel like you're being followed around the internet? Maybe advertisers know a bit too much about you. Our new sponsor, IPVanish VPN, is here to help you take back your privacy and help you become anonymous on the internet. IPVanish is a virtual private network of VPN. It's an important tool that helps you safely browse the internet. You can use it on your computers, tablets, phones, even a Fire Stick if you're streaming media. When you use a VPN, all your data is encrypted, what you're reading, what you're searching, what you're watching, whatever it is you're doing. And that's important because what you're doing on the internet is nobody's business but yours. And IPVanish is offering 65% off their annual plan. So it's only $3.75 a month. Super easy to use. You turn it on with one click. It runs in the background, protecting you while you're browsing the web. You run into problems, you boomers out there, don't worry. They've got 24/7 support by email, chat, and telephone. If you go to ipvanish.com/malice and use promo code malice, you get 65% off. Their annual plan is just $44.99 with our exclusive discount. This is the time to sign up. With our discount and their promotion, you get a VPN for 65% off. That's ipvanish.com/malice to get the deal and start protecting yourself online.
This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Pettisy.
I love hearing people's stories of resilience and grit. This is why I created this podcast.
We are very excited to welcome Jim Gaffigan, Yasmin Mohammed, Glenn Beck, Tim Dillon, Abigail Schreier, Jeff Garland, Ayan Hirsi Ali, Sam Harris, Heather Hying,
Jonah Goldberg,
Ben Shapiro, Glenn Greenwald, Sarah Shahi, Colin Quinn.
If there's a culture of victimhood, then let's tell stories of grit and survival.
Subscribe and listen now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What can you catch us up on? I'm sure you've been following very, very closely what's been going on between parents and teachers associations, school boards, in terms of promulgating critical race theory and moves to either make it illegal or to remove from the curriculum. How bad is it, and how deceptive is the conversation about it?
It's bad, actually. That is, so this is happening, first of all over the country. The kind of flashpoint that everybody's seeing is happening in Loudoun and Fairfax counties in Virginia, which I think touch each other. My Northern Virginia geography isn't what it could be.
Well, just turn around, dude.
Oh yeah, good call. No, DC. I fly in and out of DC a lot, so there's a lot of scribbles on that part of the map.
Good. Let's wipe it off the face of the earth.
Yeah, there we go. It's happening kind of everywhere. I ran into it in Southern California. I've run into it here in Tennessee. I've run into it in Wisconsin. I've run into it even in freaking Oklahoma, which I don't think they're correct. I think it's still Wyoming, but they boast that they might be the reddest state in the country. And it's happening literally everywhere, even in Florida, which, you have DeSantis having taken some steps to try to, create room around the issue. It's happening there. And so the teachers unions are strongly at the heart of the problem. They have been for a long time. A lot of people don't know that one of the very first, what we would recognize as anti-racism or white awareness type manuals, white anti-racism manuals that was ever written was in 1973 by a woman named Patricia Bidall. It's called something like, I always forget. I might actually have it right in front of me. So let me see if I have it. Because she wrote two things and I always get them confused which one's which. Whoops. I was looking up in the P's instead of the B's in this biography. It is Developing New Perspectives on Race was her 1970 book, but Racism in Education, she wrote in 1973. So Patricia Bidall wrote Racism in Education in 1973. And it would be the first thing that you would find in the literature. Those two books would be that resemble Robin DiAngelo, if you want kind of the just thumbnail. It's the prejudice plus power definition appears for the first time in her 1970 book. So she's the coiner of prejudice plus power. That's what racism is. She has the whole, you're either racist or anti-racist already in 1970. She says that white racism is a form of schizophrenia and needs to be treated as like a mental disorder. I mean, it's all out. And so in 73, she writes this summary of that 1970 book for schools. Kind of like a workbook, and it was commissioned by the NEA. They paid for it. They asked her to do it. And they distributed it as widely as they could. So the school boards, the school boards and school board associations have been at the heart of this all along. They have been a highly infiltrated set of organizations that have very little interest in parents or students, and a very large amount of interest in political agendas using teachers as the pawns to achieve those for a very long time. So the conversation is utterly deceptive. They are obviously pushing critical race theory. The big hot one in Virginia, of course, is if you look at, they're saying, oh, well, we don't even have critical race theory. And then you look at their program from the Virginia Department of Education, which is called Ed Equity Virginia. It's like contributing partners are Gloria Ladstone Billings, who wrote Toward a Critical Race Theory of Education in 1995, Ibram Kendi, Bettina Love, who's the abolitionist teacher. So, like one of these kind of extreme wings where critical race theorists tend to pretend it's not even critical race theory because it's so extreme. She's on the, list. And I've read
what makes her so extreme?
She was the one who said that, what in the world did she say that white people are spirit murdering people of color through the application of secret invisible racism throughout everything. So she's pretty spirit murdering. I mean, that's pretty intense. And then her goal is abolitionist education, which abolitionism means not in the sense that you would probably agree with, but the weirdo lefty abolishment of prisons and police and every other thing, which of course is so they can have a secret police of their own that's in charge. So she's a fringe, but this is what the Board of Education or Department of Education for the state has put forth. And I've read through it. It's shot through with critical race theory. I went to Loudoun and did a workshop with some people there and read through the just kind of like the defining our terms at the beginning. And it's just every one of them is a critical race theory definition.
But can you tell people what those would be so people would be aware of how to spot it?
Yeah. So everything that talks about systemic racism and equity is critical race theory. Critical race theory is the study of systemic racism, which sounds like I didn't say very much, except when you realize what systemic racism is. Systemic racism is a particular way of viewing racism that is in fact how a Marxist would shift from
Right.
class to race. That's what systemic racism means. And so critical race theory is that. So if it's talking about systemic racism or even structural racism, it's probably, I mean, north of 95% chance you're dealing with critical race theory. If it says
or you're dealing with a conservative.
Sure. And if it says that, if it says that the goal is to create equity in all we do, blah, 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 equity is redistribution of power, privilege, and resources. So again, we're dealing with critical race theory. That is a critical theory of race if it's talking about racial equity. Racial equity is the goal. And so it's shot through with that logic, just consistently, people reproducing systems of power, often unconsciously, blah, 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 everything systems of power. So this is their Department of Education's program for schools going forward. And what do you hear the teachers union say? Well, basically they're saying, and it's not far from what they're actually saying. So when I say basically, I'm not putting words very far into their mouth, but they're saying, we don't teach critical race theory, but if we did, it would be absolutely necessary. And we're going to back every teacher who does teach it. And we're going to, prevent them from being sued and, all of these different things. And,
can I ask a question? Because I'm sorry to use this as a comparison because I still only want to ask my background. North Korea says we don't use the term concentration camps, therefore we don't have any. So is this basically what they're doing? They're saying we're not using the term critical race theory, therefore what we're teaching is not critical race theory?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes is the yes part. They are actually just calling it by other names. And the no is there's a little semantic game here. That's a slightly different game than the one that you're referring to. And that semantic game is that you could teach critical race theory as an academic theory.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Right. And that actually is a postgraduate level or, college level, at least, kind of law tilted, but not necessarily law tilted thing. And you would not be teaching that to third graders. So they're not getting third graders to read Derek Bell or Kimberly Crenshaw.
Yeah.
But what you have instead, the point of a critical theory is always to put it into praxis. In other words, to do the critical theory, to awaken. In fact, the goal of a critical theory is to awaken the consciousness that critical theory is trying to awaken. They call it a critical consciousness, in this case of race. And they are doing all of the things with all of the same idea structure, but they are not teaching critical race theory the way that you would teach, say, a postgraduate seminar on legal theory. And so that's one of the semantic tricks they're playing. The other thing is that they are just tucking it within something broader called, say, culturally responsive teaching, or something else broader like social and emotional learning or ethnic studies. So they're tucking it into other things, or they're a lot of their game is to reframe how something else is being taught or being discussed. So mathematics can be turned into a social justice lesson, for example, by you draw a number line and you talk about it being measurements or whatever, and so you could use any kind of thing, this pile of rocks weighs this much, that pile of rocks weighs that much, put them on the number line in terms of how much they weigh so you can see. Or and this is a real example from a recent graduate that I spoke with the other day, and she wrote about it. Her name's Holly. She actually wrote that when she was in one of her courses, she's a mathematics major. I think, though, it was a diversity course. They drew the number line and they made everybody fill out this quiz about how much privilege they have. And then everybody had to go put their privilege score on the number line with their name in front of the whole class. And then the rest of the next class or two was devoted to discussing what it was like to have all that privilege. And obviously you can then reframe a mathematics lesson as a social justice lesson. That's explicitly in the book titled A Handbook of Critical Race Theory in Education with this guy, Daniel Solorzano, who's a activist in the education field, gives that almost that same example. He says, when you're teaching the coordinate plane, and he gives an example from another teacher who had written to him. He says, when you're teaching the coordinate plane, XY axis, you can have like commitment to social justice on one axis, awareness of racial inequality or inequity on the other axis. And you can plot people like on their political compass score of social justice, but that's now your algebra 1 XY axis basic functions class. So that kind of stuff's happening. It's not just in history, it's happening in every subject they can find time to put it into. very monomaniacal. So these stories that the teachers unions and the administrators and maybe McAuliffe himself are telling are just not in alignment with what's really going on. And it has all of this sense, because this is what it is, of having something false inside of a box. They've got their nice little rhetorical box of how they're describing it. But what's going on, and this is what I think Tim Poole called it, critical race applied principles, crap, which is pretty funny.
Yeah.
But it actually, the real name for it is already crap. It's critical race, and there's your RA, critical race praxis, which is the putting of a Marxian theory into practice.
Let me just ask you, okay, what is the difference? Is a critical consciousness basically the same exact thing as class consciousness? Or just a refurbished
blown out
of it?
to other dimensions of it.
So
class consciousness was Marx's conception. So it's very simple. Critical consciousness is actually a little bit deeper, because Marx was not very into the idea of false consciousness. Marx and Engels maybe mentioned it twice between them or 3 times between them. Very rare. It wasn't. He thought that the workers were being exploited and could just basically be educated into being aware of that fact. He did not think, as Herbert Marcuse phrased it, that the heteronymous interests were brainwashing them into a false consciousness where they weren't even aware of their own servitude. For Marx, looking at 19th century industrial capitalism, the workers were aware of their conditions.
Yeah.
But for the neo-Marxists, they had to contend with a harder problem, which is that capitalism worked, especially once the monopoly problems, kind of labor movements for whatever other things they were tied up in, did some good work and broke down monopoly problems and, these grotesque worker abuses and all of these things. And kudos to the socialists that helped in that, good for them, because these were real. But what happened is we entered into what Marcuse and the other critical theorists, Horkheimer, et cetera, called advanced capitalism. And advanced capitalism creates like a brainwashing. It's actually the interest, like the idea would be like, you don't know that you're a slave to Nike because Nike's advertised to you and made you want that shoe. And, before you could even realize as a young urban inner city black that cool basketball shoe isn't going to make you actually play basketball any better, first of all. And second of all, it's not going to buy books for school or whatever else. Before you even realize that the pathway out of your condition of servitude lies in skipping the Nike and doing something that promotes your own interests better, Nike's already got you. And so now you're brainwashed by the corporate capitalist and consumer mindset that they exude. So critical consciousness is awareness of the mass brainwashing by the capitalist class, which Marx himself didn't necessarily really believe in. Marx's model of oppression was pretty straightforward. I'm the boss and I'm basically going to either starve you or beat you if you don't do what you're supposed to. Whereas for the neo-Marxists, their understanding of power and depression were slightly different. It was that everybody's being brainwashed. Everybody's being fooled into believing that they have a good life when they're actually servants to a system that's oppressing them and repressing them and exploiting them still. And so critical consciousness is an awareness of this grand conspiracy that is the functioning of a capitalist society to get people to want to buy things and to not want to rock the boat too hard. Marcuse was very, in his own words, concerned that the working class had become a stabilizing, counter-revolutionary, even conservative force by the fact that, in his own words, the society works for them. And so now you don't have the capacity to make revolutionaries out of them. So a critical consciousness is an awareness that there's a mass brainwashing of whichever the oppressed group is. So for the neo-Marxists, straight up 1964 and before, for neo-Marxists up to that point, that would be consumer capitalism was the brainwashing entity. And starting in the mid 60s, I don't want to just pin it on one-dimensional man or whatever in 64, but around that time, with all of the things that were going on with the civil rights movement, this racial or other, sexual or gendered with feminism consciousness was rising in also. So it's kind of like this anti-capitalism and then the feminist consciousness, feminism merged into this, identity is somehow relevant to keeping people brainwashed too. And you can read this, like Robin DiAngelo, I actually have this book right here. I didn't put it there. It's called Is Everyone Really Equal? It's like finding a dead body. She actually says this on page 5 or something like that. She says that these movements, meaning critical theory, et cetera, all started in the type of liberal humanism. And she says that that means individual freedom and peace, but quickly turned into a rejection of liberal humanism. The ideal of individual autonomy that underlies liberal humanism, the idea that people are free to make independent, rational decisions that determine their own fate, was viewed as a mechanism for keeping the marginalized in their place by obscuring larger structural systems of inequality. In other words, it, meaning freedom, fooled people into believing they had more freedom and choice than societal structures actually allow. So a critical consciousness is becoming aware that there's a grand conspiracy theory that nobody even knows they're participating in throughout society. And that maybe is consumer capitalist, that maybe is racial, that maybe is sex based, that maybe is gender based, that maybe is cis heteronormative or whatever it happens to be. But critical consciousness means believing in a gigantic conspiracy theory that the people who are so-called in the privileged class are conspiring outside of their own knowledge to keep everybody else down.
Is this where the concept of like internalized racism or internalized homophobia come from?
Yes. So the internalization, of course, is a very feminist idea. I think it probably started with internalized patriarchy or an internalized misogyny. But that is the kind of identity-based refinement of false consciousness, becomes the internalization of the dominant narrative. And I mean, you can see that before critical theory was really on the scene. W.E.B. Du Bois is talking in 1903 in The Souls of Black Folk about his double consciousness idea, right? And so this idea, but that actually still has older roots. That goes all the way back to Rousseau through Hegel in the master-slave dialectic. And so the whole idea is that the people who are oppressed have double sight and double awareness and double identity. And so when that becomes an awareness, not just of difference, but also of a belief in a grand conspiracy in the so-called master class to keep the so-called slave class down, which of course Nietzsche would comment on how much resentment is going to be bubbling up through that. That's when you're dealing with a critical consciousness. I seriously think it's like Crit-anon. It's like taking on a gigantic conspiracy theory about how the world works.
Thank you for that. This is a huge digression because you were talking about Governor McCall, Terry McAuliffe's run for
I was
governor.
talking about
and what was going on there with the Virginia race.
Well, I mean, it's just broadly speaking, what's happening in the Virginia race is very, very interesting because the regime is seeing how mad the people are.
Yeah. For
the first time in a way that's really got, the color out of their skin a little bit.
And I think it's very, very stupid, although I don't think they had a choice in alienating suburban white women, because that is really the swing vote. And they are very uppity and they do not like things that are upsetting their kids.
Well, I was told at the very beginning, right after St. Floyd perished, peace be upon him, right after he died, I was speaking with a political scientist that I know through a friend. So I don't know this guy very well, but apparently he's quite well known in the field. And he told me that something like cultural revolutions tend to only get pushed back outside of militarily in one of two ways. And sadly, I can only remember one of the two, which happened to be that the one that I remember, though, actually, is one of those conversations like we're having where digressions happen. I don't know if we ever covered the second one. And so, or I just forgot, but I'm almost positive I just didn't ever hear it. But the one was that when largely middle-class parents realize that their children are at threat.
Yes.
That's the end. That's curtains for an attempted takeover. Because middle-class parents, I honestly believe this. I honestly think the people that push ideologies like this, the totalitarian ideologies, are not totally in touch with how human beings
but let me just interject to agree with you. This was Lenin's whole realization, because he constantly, the biggest enemy wasn't even the capitalists per se, but the petty bourgeois. They were the ones, the shopkeepers, right, who were the big threat. We know the capitalists are enemies. They know we're their enemies, but these are the ones who are in our way from preventing a revolution from either happening or becoming fulfilled to the end, because of their stupid little morals and their stupid concern with their stupid family values. And they're the real villains in a sense for him. And he's agreeing with your contact.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so I don't think these people understand, though, the lengths to which normal everyday people will go to protect their children, which will be to literally die for them. Like everything's on the table when you put somebody in that position. And to show up to, chant "Let's go Brandon" at a school board meeting is not much of an outlay when people seriously look at their children and the say mental and even physical integrity of their children's minds and bodies being on the line. You've now awakened a monster. And what is it in Virginia? The swing of the education vote alone was like 42 points or something like that.
Holy crap.
And now that's of course a very narrow subset of the voters. It's ones I don't know the definition, but I think it's voters whose lead issue is education. And they swung 42 points to Youngkin. And this is already, I was in DC talking to some folks. That fact alone, regardless of what happens in the election tomorrow and in the middle of the night after, regardless of that, has already sent a burning bright flare into Washington, which is, oh shit, America's mad about education. And it's going to be the issue. And critical race theory and whatever the social emotional learning and the pedophile stuff and, the rape cover-ups. All of this corruption that's all easily tied back into theory is going to be at the heart of what's motivating everyday moms and dads and everyday voters. And so Washington's already starting to, I know they're already starting to reshape their strategies because of what's happening in Virginia.
Yeah, if it wasn't for social media, they'd be able to say with a straight face, and corporate media would repeat this with a straight face, that all we're doing is teaching young kids not to be prejudiced and to treat everyone with respect, regardless of happen to be their skin color or national origin. And any attacks on this are just people who don't want their kids to learn not to hate. Like they would say, and you would hear this mantra probably repeated verbatim on every channel, including Fox, and no one would be the wiser.
Yeah. And from what I understand, to a degree, that was sort of the intended trajectory of this project. And I don't want to, toot my horn too much because, I think I've played only a small part in great deeds here. But from what I've been told by somebody who is in a position to know some of this stuff, the regime never expected that everyday parents were going to figure out what critical race theory was in time to fight back the way that they needed to.
And fight back this hard.
Exactly.
It's not like they're just sending a letter. It's like, oh, cool letter, garbage. It's like, no, we're actually showing up, which is somewhat unprecedented.
Yeah. To get Americans to show up and be politically engaged at the local level takes essentially an act of God or communism. And it turns out we have the second one.
Well, the specter is haunting America.
Yeah. I'm telling you, everywhere I'm going, all around the country, the parents are the backbone of a resistance movement that is going to be hard to deal with. They are angry in like every state I go to.
I actually learned this myself. Like people who are my locals, which is kind of a Patreon version that Dave Rubin started. I thought it was going to be young autistic males who are just kind of loners. And it's overwhelmingly, especially my biggest supporters, people who have small businesses who, because they have families, they're not in a position to have a public face to their views, but they're like, let me toss you a few bucks because you're fighting what I wish I could be fighting. So that was something I learned on my own. And I was very surprised and gladdened to learn that.
I wonder if that's the second group that ends up pushing these things back, is when small business owners realize that they are in tremendous danger of losing their livelihoods. I don't know if that was the other answer from the political scientist, but it wouldn't surprise me. And the fact that the regime's like pedal to the metal against both of them.
Yeah.
I mean, if this great reset stuff is what's going on, the goal is to completely revamp everything. So of course they have to go at everything all at once. But people are, a lot of people have talked that they're afraid that the sleeping giant's going to wake up and all this, and it rumbled and it grumbled or whatever, and it rolled over in its sleep. I honestly think what's waking back up in a sense is America. It's really weird. I talk to these people, there's that thing like Charlie Kirk had the guy ask him a question that everybody suspects is, a plant that was, when do we get to start shooting?
Yeah.
And the truth is that, well, I've had people ask me that as well. And the answer is simple. In a free society or liberal society, nobody has authorization to use violence first. So you don't. There was one guy even asked me personally, he straight up asked, and I don't think he was a Fed because he was really drunk, or very good at acting really drunk. And he said so you're saying some of our side have to die before we can start shooting? And I was like, yes.
Oh yeah, that's not
Absolutely.
even-
Nobody gets to do violence first in a civil society. And so that's the answer. But that said, I don't hear anything like that. I hear people afraid that something like that will eventually get provoked.
Yeah.
And that they don't want that. And what that they want is they want the law to work. They want people to just quit their jobs so we can get back to the business of doing business, as the old saying goes.
Yeah, I think a lot of this parental reaction isn't simply to what is being taught. I think the level of emotion is also not only you're teaching this, you're lying to me about what you're teaching to my kids. So there's a very big, if I sat down with you and said, James, I'm going to be promoting, North Korean style totalitarianism, you would, but if I said to you that I'm going to be promoting liberal democracy, and then I was doing the other, you would have a much different and much more, not literally violent reaction, because now I'm a con artist, and now I'm a con artist in charge of your kid. And we really have a problem.
That's right. This is when I went on Rogan last summer. This is literally what I wanted to talk to him about. And I was pacing my hotel room the night before, like too hot. Like I can't go on Rogan and be this guy now. I'm too hot. But it was because that's ultimately what took me. I said I red pilled myself on the COVID with the data, but what really red pilled me was the lying through June of last year.
Yeah.
The lying. It's when you realize you're being lied to. And that's where I know you've interacted with me on Twitter. Because I said, take many red pills, and you're like, you're in danger, girl. And I was like, I don't mean it like that. I mean, like, there's a lot of narratives.
Oh, yeah.
And you actually, you sometimes kind of have to re-up a little bit, but you don't want to go all the way into like full conspiracy country either. Because like, first of all, if for no other reason, you're not supposed to say practical reasons. You're supposed to say moral reasons first. Well, the moral reason's obvious. I'm not going to say why, but the practical reason is, man, that is the Fed swamp, man. Do not get too far into a conspiracy theory, because the next thing you know, you're going to be recruited to be driving some white van somewhere that you just, how did, record scratch? Yeah, that's me. Maybe you're wondering how I got myself in this situation.
I was on the Cumia show, and there was, I forget the guy's name. He's a former baseball player, and he was putting out the theory that the vaccines are designed to sterilize the poor. And I'm like, how would they be able to, were they going to run a credit check? And I go, this doesn't even make sense, because if any socioeconomic group is getting the vaccines disproportionately, it's the wealthiest. It's urban, educated, wealthy elites. So, and I actually had to text Alex. I'm like, do you think Alex Jones would believe you? And the guy's like, I don't know. I'm like, fine. And I texted Alex, and he's like, they can't do that. So when you're to the point where Alex Jones is like, what the hell are you talking about? Sit down and shut up. Like, you're definitely far afield.
Let me correct both of you. Variants.
James, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
I really like when we were just cutting up at the beginning, and I didn't feel like I had to answer any hard questions, because that's fun.
You are welcome.